Are we ready? Yeah. Kirk United Church congregation was a declining community of faith that took a courageous look at themselves and the neighborhood and decided to think outside of the box. In 2015, Kirk congregation worked with its governing body, the Edmonton Presbytery, to rethink the options of what can be done with a church building when the congregation can no longer sustain it. A continued presence in Northwest Edmonton was very important to everyone involved. The impact of selling the church and property would have affected the entire community. In many cases, condominiums and retail space is constructed in these types of sold lots, causing a large shift in the feel of an established community. Communities need space to come together in many different ways. Kirk Centre provides this space. As a not-for-profit, we feel as though we have created a great model to repurpose structurally sound buildings in establishing the not-for-profit that manages the building as a community hub to ensure that there are affordable, common spaces for any community group or program. Kirk Centre has been steadily growing since its inception 4 years ago. We have many groups coming through our doors on a weekly and monthly basis. Most of these are private renters. This has started the process of getting our name out into the community. We have had our nose to the grind trying to fill our spaces to ensure a bright future for the centre. We also begun the process of rebranding to ensure that passerbys are aware that we are no longer a single congregation church, but a diverse community hub with much to offer, a hub that is open to many possibilities. Kirk Centre has grown to be a thriving community hub in the Dovercourt community. We continue to pave a new way forward for Edmonton's community hubs and its beautiful existing structures and infrastructure. Kirk Centre is dedicated to providing open, safe, diverse, accessible, and inclusive community centre where many groups contribute to a vibrant Northwest Edmonton hub. We think our space and its core values will be very attractive to those who provide community programming, but have no space to run the programs in the communities, or for those who provide outreach into the communities. We are looking ahead to partnering with these groups to arrange space for their educational, recreational, cultural, health, small business, multicultural events, and multi-denominational worship initiatives for youth and for adults. We are looking to work closely with these organizations to aid them in giving opportunities to community members to participate in programming that will enhance the daily lives of the community. Kirk Centre is looking forward to working in cooperation with other community groups and businesses for the betterment of the community and the city of Edmonton.
Charge in Southern Ontario, consisting of a small rural church and a larger small town church, working together but not harnessed. The main focus was on Sunday morning traditional workshop, weekly attendance, the measure of ministry wellness. Always one minister in leadership, very frequent changeover. Churches provided ongoing pastoral care for members, funeral lunches and catering, community suppers, and so on. Sometimes rooms were rented, but no real partnerships. No virtual presence in essence, no website, no social media accounts, no email connections with members, and no organized pastoral care groups. The focus had turned inward, looking at ways to survive, seemingly welcome to newcomers, but often uneasy with change. Mostly lacking in direction and vision for a future that did not include the shadow of closure. What we are now, we are in the midst of an attempt to morph into a fully implemented community hub, providing compassionate care, spiritual nourishment, and grace sanctuary to the neighborhood by offering 2 buildings as commoning space and partnering both virtually and actually with others who desire, as we do, to serve the community in a spirit of radical, generous hospitality. We are currently partnered in some capacity with 10 local community initiatives, 2 other faith traditions, as well as a multi-faith group, 5 international collectives, and the ongoing support of EDGE, Embracing the Spirit, and Community Innovation Hub. While our physical buildings are closed, we are fast-tracking our technological updates, continuing our financial switchover to streamline digital systems, and designing and launching a new website to reflect our outward focus. With our gaze steadily outward, we are producing a weekly podcast now on iTunes just this morning, hosting 3 weekly Zoom offerings to the neighborhood and creating a virtual resource wall. Where are we going? Hopefully in the same direction, forward and facing outward, while being inwardly more spiritually grounded, continuing to develop our innovative hub, becoming a preferred partner and a graced presence in the community. We would hope to be developing more enduring relationships with our existing partners while attracting new ones and encouraging all the partners to interact more one with the other. We would hope to be developing a governance that more accurately reflects the makeup of our partners as opposed to being governed only by the church proper. We would be restructuring and refurbishing our buildings to reflect current environmental sensibilities, welcoming space, current technology, and a variety of spaces of our various uses. The leadership would not be one single minister, ordained or otherwise, but a cohort of leaders working together to realize the full
That's 3 minutes, Candace.
I'm finished.
So I'm calling in from BC, and I want to tell you about the Denman Island United Church. Denman Island is a small little Gulf island off of Vancouver Island. And we were a small, shrinking congregation of about 20 people, mostly over 65. And we're dwindling in resources of money and enthusiasm. And the people who had been leading the congregation were experiencing burnout. There's no one pastor. So it was kind of unclear what was happening, and it seemed like it would eventually fizzle out and die. In the wider Denman community, there's a vibrant earth-based spirituality sense of being connected to the land and seasons and honoring those times of year. There's people who identify as pagans or witches, which in the history of the church has been a very volatile, triggering word, and the relationship between pagans and Christians has been awful, to say the least. So now, the Denman Island Church, in its attempt to be more expansive and vibrant and relevant, has connected with these beautiful pagan people who have a really alive sense of the Spirit as immanent in all things and in creation, and has opened its doors to those people. And the collaboration between the pagans and the Christians, I find really exciting. It kind of makes me tingle because it's like healing a larger pattern in a small little microcosm. So we've been able to host solstice celebrations, equinox events. We've built a labyrinth in the churchyard, which is an ecumenical meditation tool outside. And we've also been learning from the pagans about non-hierarchical leadership and consensus-based decision-making. And this particular pagan tradition, which comes out of the reclaiming movement in California, has a really strong focus on how spirituality plays out in social justice, which has, of course, ties to the history of the United Church. So there's a lot of mutual ground as far as caring for the community, caring about social issues and environmental ones. Going forward, I see us continuing to learn from each other to be this interfaith hub where people from all walks of life and spirit can come and join together in song. We have a little building that has excellent acoustics, and where people used to just know it was a building on the top of the hill, now there's sort of this gossip amongst people like, oh, something's happening at the church, what's going on? And that's exciting to see. So I think we're doing something at a small scale that in a pattern of
and I'm volunteering at this point is that I'm going to have to leave the meeting early because I have another 2:00 thing. In the meantime, Rama United is an indigenous church. It was established, in 1864. And it burnt down and it got rebuilt in 1909. And then it was fairly vigorous. And eventually it became a frail vestige of a traditional small Sunday centered church that folks are pretty well familiar with. So that's where we were. We are now in the process of redefining ourselves. And where we hope to get ourselves is that we end up being a community-based, having a community-based membership that is doing community gatherings and projects outside the sanctuary walls. Where we're a little different is that we have selected the spiritual gifts which are equal to the traditional spiritual teachings of the indigenous folks in a large part of North America, particularly around the Great Lake areas. And we are using, we measure our spiritual activity in terms of production and presence of the gifts of the Spirit. So the first thing we want to measure is there a gift of the Spirit being produced, and that it's being produced by the particular activity being described. Of course, there's going to be cultural activities happening simultaneously in the same action, but we try to separate the two. Yeah, so that would basically where we're going to be at and where we're going to. Now, we want to measure spiritual activity and production of fruits of the Spirit on an individual basis, but also in that way see if there's any individual growth in a production of fruits of the Spirit. And we also want to do that at a communal gathering, communal project level, where we are going to be able to, by quantifying and measuring spiritual outcomes based on fruits of the Spirit, we hope to see whether we are participating in an increase of production of the fruits of the Spirit in individuals and with ourselves as a community. So if we happen to use, say, a Thanksgiving gathering, it's very nice that we prepare a nice indigenous soup outside and we have a sacred fire going on, and we smudge ourselves before we start the meal.
2 or 3 years with Carla and Colleen and now Sarah. And one of the things I've helped is in the creation of kits to be used by community innovation hubs to grow their organization. And many of those kits will be free for those members who become part of the Community Innovation Hub. And that's pretty cool. So one of the most recent I did was on wellness kit, which covers 8 areas of wellness that you may find really interesting. And I also do podcasts, and I've completed about 12 podcasts so far under the Give Back Economy, which was the name of the book that Carla and I wrote called The Give Back Economy. So it has the same name. So the other thing that I would like to comment on is to encourage you to attend our gathering event on April the 24th, and Colleen can provide you with additional information.
So there's no way I'm critiquing.
And for the entire 33-year history of this congregation, we have not owned a facility and have rented school space for our Sunday meetings. In the year 2000, which was the peak of our congregational size, we purchased 50 acres of land in Oakville, thinking that we would one day develop a church campus there. And all along, we have been in the conservative evangelical space of the overall church. In the present, due largely to a journey of theological and biblical interpretive and philosophy of ministry evolution and disconnect, we are presently a congregation of about 15 people with a 50-acre land asset. We are in the process of creating a collaborative commons in downtown Mississauga called Heart Commonus, as well as a millennial project in downtown Toronto. So 2 projects. And we are currently identifying and convening the collaborative partnerships for this project. Future, what we are really aiming for is the work of integration, where all spheres of life together integrate with spirituality. In a world where the divine is perceived in such diverse ways, not only within Christianity, but also in the larger spiritual spectrum, resulting in so much division, suffering, and violence historically, instead of love, acceptance, understanding, compassion, oneness, and inclusiveness, in a world where the spiritual values of justice and equality are somehow separated from economic praxis, where since World War II, what we have essentially established is a system where 1% of the global population owns more wealth than the 99% combined, and where the poorest billion people account for 1% of consumption and the richest billion accounts for 72% of consumption, and more barrier walls and fences around countries than ever before, most of them erected since the year 2000. Maybe, as Rutger Bregman, his book Utopia for Realists, recommended to me by Heather Beamish, looks at all this and says, maybe we will look at barriers one day in the same way that we think today of the elimination of slavery and apartheid. So something to shoot for. And
I'm going to focus on one of them because trying to fit the 2 into 3 minutes would not work very well. So I'm just going to focus on the one. The idea of the Wild Rose Wellness Hub dates back to 2002. The hub was a creative and innovative idea that was part of the broader vision for the Wild Rose United Church. The community outreach, social justice initiatives were precursors to the work of the present-day Wild Rose Wellness Hub. In 2002, Pleasant Heights United Church and Rosedale United Church amalgamated into Wild Rose United Church. The idea of the Wellness Hub initially centered around the creation of a youth hub to help youth who were homeless and needed transitional housing, medical attention, or appropriate referrals. At the time, Wild Rose United Church owned the property on the corner of 12th Ave and 1st Street, Northwest. Unfortunately, the idea did not win the support it needed, and eventually the property was sold. However, that was not the end of the idea of the Wellness Hub. The Outreach Committee of Wild Rose United Church formed a strong relationship with Crescent Heights High School. A survey of the students at Crescent Heights High School determined that stress was the #1 issue. In response to this, between 2010 and 2014, there was a yoga group, a rap music group from the high school that met at Wild Rose United Church. A professional rapper and a yoga instructor worked with the students. Through this partnership, there was also a group of ESL students who learned language skills through a community kitchen. At the same time, the church worked with the Drop-In Center. I wrote this for the Calgary context. That's a homeless shelter here. Art therapy program providing space and art supplies and a cart, as well as an instructor. There was also a single mothers group with the Alex who received life skills sessions, as well as a community kitchen to help young families with nutrition. In the spring of 2016, there was a transition to support a wellness hub based on the 8 pillars of wellness. The Spiritual Health and Wellness Hub Committee was formed in 2016 through the board. Members of that committee provide oversight to the work of the hub. Community engagement through the hub and outreach committees continue with Reset, an organization to get women off the street, and with the high school through Breakfast Bag Program and Bike-a-thon. The hub also offered programs through Wonderful Wellness Wednesdays and the Awakening series. To serve the community better, in 2020, the hub shifted to offering spiritual but not religious programming. The religious programming would be offered more directly through the church. Wild Rose United Church is such a beautiful building in a fantastic community. Our goal is to have it be used 7 days a week as a place of wellness for all. During the COVID-19 crisis, we launched a virtual presence for the Wellness Hub to serve the community and beyond. We started the wonderful wellness blog and podcasts, creating a new website and social media pages, and changed the way we're.
I'm going to start then. I'm Jennifer from Sanctuary Coffee. Sanctuary Coffee is a social enterprise modeled coffee shop located literally in the sanctuary of Knox United Church, which is a 100-year-old beautiful building. So Sanctuary Coffee started off as a pilot project from the Emerging Ministries part of Knox, because Knox wanted to become a more community-facing church. Knox already had been one of the first churches to be affirming, so there's already that root of trying to open up to all. So Sanctuary Coffee is built up on a 3-pillared mission, which is to combat social isolation, equip our volunteers, and promote sustainability. And that is still who we are now. We have our groups, we're a coffee shop, and we have one hired staff, which is myself, and everyone else that works there are volunteers who come from all walks of life. I would say that we usually have 10 to 15 people in our roster of volunteers, and I can say honestly that our volunteers come to us not even knowing how to spell the word espresso. So their journey is really so inspiring and so fulfilling. Where we are now, though, is in transition, or I would think a better word is to say we're in development. So as we were gaining traction, becoming known in the community downtown, we actually got shut down. So we've been closed for almost a year. And so we were kind of doing social isolation for a while now. But this has really actually given us an opportunity in the silence. It's given us a chance to standardize our volunteer program so that we actually have documentation and processes, and now we can issue certificates, and we have a very structured training program, which helps us for what we want to become, which is to be a sanctuary for downtown Calgary. Addressing the equipping skills of volunteers, we want to create and cultivate relationships with other social good organizations, such as giving skills to people who were previously homeless or recovering from addiction or recovering from abuse, and be a place that can support other projects and other groups that either touch on social isolation, touch on skill development, and touch on sustainability. Oh, so I